right, well, welcome everybody to week 3 of the Wellness Challenge, and thanks for coming out and braving that cold with the red cheeks now. So, as I said, Anna was going to be here, but she's had another day where she needed to be called out to Maple Creek. So thank you, Kathy. She's going to come and speak on carbs today. And if you have any questions throughout that, please ask. Also, there is the new recipe that's there, but it'll be online too. And if any of you are waiting to find out the mid-results, I'm going to send them out this afternoon. But our leading team, I can say right now, is with 224 points. They are here for their extra 5 points today, and that is 1-2 Mayweather. So congratulations, you're sitting in first right now, according to all of my my results that have been brought in. So, but there's some really close teams. Like you're not holding it by a lot. There's 2 teams that are behind you by 1 point, and then it's just by a couple points. So keep those points coming in, and then the final points will come in on February 23rd, and I will be telling everybody this through email this afternoon, but it wraps up on Sunday the 18th. So we are now into week 3, and then next week, and that's it for 4 weeks of the Wellness Challenge. So hope it's all going well. I'm going to pass it over to Kathy, and this is about carbs.
Thanks, Val. And it's crackly. Last week it was good.
It's gonna cooperate.
It's going to cooperate? Okay. If I don't move, I'll just stay right here. No moving. Okay. So today we're going to talk about carbs. Last week we talked about proteins and fats. Carbs are kind of get a bad rap these days. You know, it's all low carb, but I'm just going to go through and talk about what a carbohydrate is, why we need them, can you get too much, can you get too little, and all those sorts of things. So hopefully some information that maybe you're not aware of. Okay, so what are carbohydrates? Anybody know? Basically, carbohydrates are sugar molecules that are all connected together. So they are broken down into sugar in the body. So that's what carbohydrates are, except for, so there's 3 kinds, and carbohydrates are also one of what we call the macronutrients. Fat and protein are also the macro, so macro means big in terms of what we need as compared to micronutrients like vitamins and minerals that we just need small amounts of. So that's what carbs are. There's 3 types, so sugar, so more just plain sugar. And there's 2 types of those as well. So there's the natural sugars and then what we call the added sugars. So when people talk about simple sugars, most of the time they're thinking about the added sugars, which are, so that's, you know, pop and candy and in baked goods and all those sorts of things. But the natural ones, anyone know what would be a natural sugar? I like asking you guys questions.
Yeah.
No.
Then I put you on video.
Going, deer in the headlights. And so natural sugars in fruit. Yeah. Honey is also a natural sugar. In fruit juice as well. Milk. So there's a natural sugar called lactose in milk. And in some vegetables they also have some of those sugars. One thing about sugars, if you're looking on labels, anything that ends in OSE is actually a sugar. So dextrose, maltose, lots of times it doesn't say sugar, but it has those. And they are all an added sugar. So those are the simple carbohydrates. Then we get into starch or complex carbohydrates. And so what do you think those are? Breads, yeah. Like quinoa, we were talking about the quinoa before we started. The recipe this week is a quinoa and veggie casserole, and quinoa is a complex carbohydrate, so it's got lots of grain in it. And these are more, if you're like sugar itself might be just one molecule attached to maybe two, there might be 2 of them together, whereas the complex carbohydrates would be more like 10 or 12. All connected together. So it takes longer to break them down and longer to have their effect in the body, and that's why they're more of a healthier type of a carbohydrate. So bread, rice, potatoes, pastas, lots of starch and complex carbohydrates in those. One more type of fiber. I'm getting all kinds of noise, I don't know if you can tell in the video. What other substance do you get in like vegetables and whole grains.
The fiber that you're looking for?
The fiber, yeah. So fiber is actually another type of carbohydrate. But it's one that we don't actually get any energy or anything from. It's more, it's in the cell walls, and it doesn't break down in the body, and so it's kind of a non-digestible type of carbohydrate. And those are found, I want to ask you this time, vegetables, fruits, and especially if you leave the skins on. The skins of vegetables and fruits have lots of fiber, and whole grains for sure, and pulses. So like the beans, peas, lentils also are really good sources of fiber. Okay. So that's what carbohydrates are. So why do we need carbohydrates? What's the major function of carbohydrates in our diet? Energy, yeah. So, and for your brain, it's one of the only sources of energy. Your brain can't use fat or protein for energy. It needs the carbohydrates, or it can use ketones. But the main source of energy for the brain is, in fact, the carbohydrates. Oh, this is my voice. So, main function is energy. Can't do anything about it. Even when I'm standing still, it's still doing it. Okay, so basically what happens with the carbohydrates, you eat them, they're digested, they get broken down into glucose, which is your simple sugar, and then it goes to the cells where it's used for energy. So what happens to extra carbohydrate? You store it. And you store it in two ways. Jackie will know some of this stuff because you're into the sports stuff. When you store it in the muscle, it's called glycogen. So with athletes, they want to store it there because that's more readily available for when they're actually doing an activity. If there's already enough stored in the muscle, or you can't store any more in the muscle, it's stored simply as fat. So carbohydrate will be converted to fat if you eat too much of it. And I mentioned fiber has no energy. So what other reasons would we have for eating carbohydrates besides energy?
Well, the fiber will be for digestion.
Yeah,
which
so
will help with
fiber is
digestion.
for bowel health. So preventing like cancer, bowel cancer, it's helpful. The type of fiber that's found in, say, fruits and vegetables is what we call the soluble fibers. And that will help to lower cholesterol, can help with blood sugars, so it's not necessarily as beneficial for bowel health, but it'll help with other things. So carbohydrates are important for disease prevention as well. And the other benefit to carbohydrates is the foods that have carbohydrates also have a lot of vitamins and minerals, so they carry a lot of other nutrients as well. So if you eliminate all whole grains, you're more likely to not get enough B vitamins. They can also be a very good source of like iron and other nutrients. So yeah, those are kind of the main benefits to eating carbohydrates. That was just for fun. I've got to keep you guys' attention. Okay. Can we get too many carbohydrates in our diet?
Sure.
Yeah. Mostly, if we get too much, it's not because we're eating a lot of the complex or the starchy type carbohydrates. It's because of the simple carbohydrates, the sugars, the added sugars and stuff. So that's generally where we get too much. And then it just gets stored in the body as fat and it's extra calories. Last week I mentioned like protein has 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9 calories per gram, and carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram as well. So similar amount of energy as protein, but they work differently in the body, so you get more of the actual energy out of them. The other thing with a lot of the simple carbohydrates or sugars is cavities, especially for kids. If they're getting a lot of the sugary stuff, then obviously it can help or may lead to dental caries and stuff. little bit harder to get too much of the complex carbohydrates because they're more filling, for one thing. And it's more likely that you're going to overeat on some of the simple carbohydrates than on something like quinoa salad. You know, it's more filling and more satisfying, so you don't tend to overeat on that as much. What about fiber? Can you get too much fiber? You could. Mostly we don't, because we should get around 25 to 30 grams of fiber in a day, and most people, the average is about 12 to 15 grams in a day, so we're not anywhere near, you know, kind of necessarily what we should have. So, but you can get too much, and if you get too much, fiber does interfere with the absorption of iron. So that's one thing. Excuse me, sorry. For vegetarians, because they're eating a lot more of the grains and the legumes and stuff, so they're getting more fiber. They're also getting less iron, and the iron they do get is not as absorbed as well as the iron that's in meat products or any type of animal product. So they can get low in iron. So iron is one of the nutrients that somebody who's strictly a vegetarian needs to be aware of, to just get it checked so they know in case they're getting too low.
So Kathy, bread, for example, would be complex or simple?
It's
Or
more
do-
of a complex because
It
it's
is.
more of a starch.
Okay. In my mind, when I think of like white bread, I think more simple, and then you get your multi-grain with lots in there. I would think it would be more complex, but maybe that's just my wrong thinking on it. Like all breads are
Yeah,
complex.
it's not necessarily more complex, but it's got more fiber.
Right,
And
right.
It'll have the bran and the germ and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So it's got more of that, but not necessarily more of the starch.
Right. Plus, I guess there could be added sugars into breads too, right?
Yeah, and
Not
most sugar
long.
has a small amount of added sugar because it makes the yeast work.
Okay, bread.
So you need the sugar there. So we can possibly get too much. Can we get too little?
A fiber?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure you can get too little fiber. So the simple carbohydrates, the added sugars, no, you really can't get too little. We don't really need any. We do get some natural simple sugars in the fruits and vegetables, so we can't get too little of that. Complex, can you get too little complex carbohydrates? Yeah, you can. You do need certain amounts, again, because they have other nutrients. But also, if your body starts using all the stored fat for energy production, you produce more ketones. So I don't know, probably some of you for sure have heard about the ketogenic diet. It's kind of the fad thing right now. Definitely causes weight loss because you wouldn't think, because mostly on the ketogenic diets, people eat a lot of fat and a lot of protein and very little carbohydrate. But because of that combination, it produces these ketones, those keto acids, and then your body breaks down the fat that's in your cells. So yeah, it does actually help with weight loss. A lot of the initial weight loss is fluid, as with any kind of low-calorie diet. And essentially, it is low calorie because generally with that type of diet, fat is very satisfying. So you get full faster and you end up eating less in a lot of cases. But it's not something that's very sustainable. And also, if you're doing that, you're also at a higher risk of possibly having higher like cholesterol or blood fats, developing stones in the urinary tract, so kidney stones or that kind of thing. And in the short term, a lot of people, when they try this, they get headaches and nausea and dizzy, and they just generally don't feel good. So, and it's just because it's not really a normal state that your body is used to having. Okay. So, we talked mostly about where the carbohydrates are found, so I don't need to do that. Glycemic index. Has anyone heard that term before? what glycemic index is. There is a lot of stuff out there about glycemic index and how you should eat foods that are a lower glycemic index. So can anyone tell me what the glycemic index actually is?
It measures sugars, doesn't it?
Yeah, it actually measures not necessarily the sugar that's in the food, but how it affects your body. So foods are measured based on, and they're compared to white bread or just plain glucose, which is your simple sugar. So if it affects your blood sugar less, then it's a lower glycemic index. So you want to, the idea is to stay away from the high glycemic index foods. And why would you want to do that? Because the lower glycemic index foods can help with blood sugar. So if you have diabetes, and often that's people with diabetes watch it. It also can help lower cholesterol, helps with appetite, because the lower glycemic index foods, again, are generally, not always, but generally like whole grains and foods that are more satisfying, and lower your risk of heart disease and diabetes. With the glycemic index, it's only one part of healthy eating, so you have to keep that in mind too. Some people focus just on one thing, but it's just one part of it. And not all foods that have a lower glycemic index are healthy. So for example, chocolate cake has a lower glycemic index than parsnips. Now which food do you think is healthier for you? The chocolate cake, yeah. Depending on the time of day. But yeah, so it's not a be-all and end-all. And the other thing with glycemic index, depends a lot what you have with it. So if you're eating a white bread sandwich, but you have ham and cheese and some margarine on there, so you've got protein fat, it makes that glycemic index go down. So it doesn't affect your blood sugars as much. So something, part of the whole carbohydrate, what they do in your body, but not necessarily something that you want to follow all the time. Okay. So some of the myths about carbohydrates. One of them, I've got 5, so you can just say if it's true or false. Carbs will make you fat.
False. Unless you have too much.
Yeah, unless you overeat, and unless it's the refined sugar type things, like, then it might. All simple carbs are unhealthy. This is to tell if you were listening. That's false, yeah. Because, yeah, pop candy, but the ones in fruit and milk are good for you. All pasta and bread are bad for you. And you hear that a lot, right? So,
False.
False, yeah. So you want to go with the whole grains as much as you can, and not overdoing on them. The other thing with pastas and grains is what you put on them, right? So compare fettuccine Alfredo to the spaghetti and meat sauce with tomatoes. You know, the Alfredo is way higher in fat and calories. Has anyone ever actually made their own Alfredo sauce from scratch? It's like equal amounts of butter and whipping cream with some garlic and salt and pepper thrown in. So yeah, it's really good for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, it tastes really good.
It tastes delicious, but not something you want to eat on a daily basis.
Part of it's a serving size too. When you go out and you get pasta, it's like
Oh, for sure.
way more than you should.
Yeah, when you're in a restaurant, you get those big serving sizes. Yeah. So. Another one, low carb diets are the only way to lose weight.
False.
False, yeah. They do make you lose weight initially, but generally speaking, it's not sustainable. So you end up regaining your weight back, right? Because you end up going back to eating those foods again. And then the last one, less than half of your diet should be carbohydrates. I think that's true or false.
Probably true.
Anywhere from 45 to 65% of your total daily calories should be from carbohydrates. So that usually means about 15% protein, and anywhere from 25 to 30% fat is kind of what's recommended. So about half should be carbohydrates. So, yeah.
But the thing that's a little deceiving with that is because immediately my brain was going to the servings in the Canadian Food Guide thinking that carbohydrates equals grains. But carbohydrates are in your fruits and vegetables too, right? So when we're saying that, it's not just that you should eat 40 to 60% bread.
No,
No.
absolutely not.
Yeah. So it's just, however that would be yummy.
A lot of us really enjoy that, but
Yeah.
yeah, and the milk, like milk products. Yogurt has some carbs in it, milk does, cheese not so much, but those other ones, puddings, they all have those carbs in them. So any questions about carbs that you're just dying to ask? Things you've heard? Or have you covered everything? No questions from the audience, Val?
I know, I do. I was waiting because I was hoping it wasn't just me for questions. Okay, couple. And maybe Jackie or, you know what, maybe some of you can answer this too. Okay, what about the whole thing with sports and the carbohydrates and about having your pasta and your carbs? Is there something to do with the time when you eat carbs and play sports?
Yes.
And maybe the audience can answer that too.
Yes, there is. It does matter.
Right.
Usually when we're talking to athletes, not to eat a lot within an hour,
Right.
and that should be mostly carbs. And then as you get further out, so maybe 4 hours ahead of time, you could still eat a high carbohydrate meal, but maybe still have some protein and fat with it. Jackie's got a funny look on her face. Is that
Yeah?
So, yeah, it does matter. And after sports, too, carbs are important for recovery. So it's good to get the fluids and some kind of carbohydrate after you're done doing an activity as well. Yeah. For most people, oh, sorry.
It also depends on your sport too.
Right.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
some are definitely, that plays a higher part in some sports compared to others, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so different sports, the timing is determined as well. And it's usually we try to individualize it for a sport as much as possible because it does vary. Yeah, definitely. So, oh, there's something else I was going to say, and now I forgot. Oh, I hope it comes back. Did you say you had 2 questions?
Yeah, I have another one. It's around the sugar. And again, I know this varies a bit, but what is the recommended grams of sugar per day? And I know it changes for ages too, but I've heard 25 and I've heard up to 50. I think 50 is for younger, but
There's
and that would
no,
no?
it's not a recommended level,
Okay.
it's an upper limit level.
All right.
So in other words, rather than saying
Right.
you should have 25 grams, you shouldn't have more than 25 grams.
Is that the
And
special
25
number?
grams is about the number, yeah, that's the number, yeah, definitely, so.
Because at Active Play yesterday, we were going through this about sugars,
Oh,
and they were
okay.
having chocolate milk with their vegetables, and I said to them, how much do you think sugar is in 1 cup of chocolate milk? Anyways, it's 28 grams in 1 cup of chocolate milk. So, you know, kids I know can be higher than 25, but I
Yeah.
think it's deceiving, especially with drinks. Like we always think, yes, the pop's high and stuff, but 25 grams can sneak up really quick.
Quickly, yeah.
We were saying, like the kids, we were figuring it out. If 50 was, a lot of them could have 50 grams before they got on the bus in the morning.
Yeah,
Because, right, if you have a glass of juice and you have a big bowl of cereal, you're probably at your max for the day.
Yeah.
So anyways, I
Yeah.
find that always interesting. And I know I could have brought it here today and I forgot, but if you've ever seen the little sugar activities where they'll have them, we had one the other year on Rethink Your Drink.
yeah.
And you'll have like an iced tea, and you'll have a Mountain Dew, and you'll have all these different drinks, and then a little and then a Ziploc of sugar. It's amazing,
really
how much
amazing
sugar
how much
in
sugar
one.
is in there.
Yeah, one bottle.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Anyways.
I could have brought that, I should have.
I know. I was just thinking I could
I'll
have.
have that kit. Could have brought it. Yeah.
Me too.
So kind of the bottom line is that carbohydrates aren't bad. You don't want too much, you don't want too little, you just want that kind of nice balance in there. And they are really important for energy, so if you eliminate carbohydrates or try to decrease them a lot, you probably will find you don't have as much energy. And it's certainly not recommended for anyone who's doing a lot of sports or any athletes that they cut back on carbohydrates. But you do hear a lot of the hype about protein now for athletes. And so sometimes that's not good because then they cut back the carbohydrate too much. So that's it for this week. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.